In this video, the Happiness Challenge, we're going to be covering the two main things standing in the way of developing happiness and how you can actually track your happiness to see, is this program that we're working on together actually working? So the two main problems here that we have to put on the table is, number one, people not treating happiness like it's a science. Yeah, the quite understandably, happiness is a feeling. A lot of people kind of experience it as just something which happens, almost like we're victims of being in a good mood. And so the idea of becoming more happy ends up sounding like a fairy tale, like a pipe dream. How can you inspire the muse to come every time you want? Now, it's not going to be exactly like that. We do have other emotions. But in order to overcome whatever is standing in the way of you being as happy as you can be, you have to be a good scientist. We have to be willing to put on the table, what are we noticing, collecting the data, being scientific in what we're noticing in our own lives so that we can actually move forward. So that's the first problem. What I would suggest using in terms of really trying to figure out what is your happiness quotient, what's your standard level of happiness that you have in your life, is the Oxford Happiness Questionnaire. It's a scientifically validated questionnaire that measures how happy you are right now. Now, happiness, like I've mentioned in other videos, is just like IQ, height, body temperature. These things exist on a continuum. There are people who are very intelligent, very tall, and have high body temperatures, and people who have low IQs, short, and on the chilly side of things. This is predominantly genetic. Now, environmental factors do trigger genes, and in my video on depression, I'm going to get a little more into that, which is important to put on the table, that increasing happiness, while related to not being depressed, is different. So I encourage you to check out that video. I'd assume, given the research, whatever your score is going to be on a scale of 1 to 6, that the 50% of that score is going to be based on your genetic makeup. The average is about 4.5. It's not too happy. We can definitely do better. 10% of that is circumstance, and this is the second thing that stands in the way of happiness. What I mean by circumstance is the things that we pursue in our lives. Again, in other videos I've mentioned this, where making more money, being married, being single, having horrible things happen to you, having great things happen to you, looking amazing, having the best job you could have, well, those things are nice, and those things do temporarily increase our happiness. But because of hedonic adaptation, we get used to those things pretty quick, and we're always comparing ourselves to the Joneses. So we're going to slide back to our genetically predisposed happiness level. But we don't believe it. Putting this into context, researchers found in the 1940s that people living at that time were just as happy as we are today on average. And you think about it, wait a second. 1/3 of everybody in the United States at that time didn't have running water in their homes. That meant no toilet, no bathtubs. And I know my grandparents, after the war, my grandfather married a nice English girl from London. She definitely had indoor plumbing. And when she moved to Iowa, the first thing she was shocked to see was there was no toilet in the house. That first year of marriage, the way my grandfather told it in his quite succinct way was, if I didn't build a toilet in our house, my wife was going to leave me. He had that toilet installed within 365 days, believe you me. Half the people during that time didn't have central heating. Imagine what it was like living, again, in Iowa, Chicago, Minneapolis, Minnesota. It is frigidly cold in those places. Yet, the average level of happiness is exactly what it is more or less today. I think 40% of people didn't even finish 8th grade. Imagine the jobs they were holding down. These people weren't pursuing professions that gave their life rich meaning necessarily. I think it was something like 5% of people actually at that time went on to university to pursue professions that were quite meaningful to them. These people had jobs. They didn't have hobbies that paid. Again, you'd think that their happiness levels would be a lot lower. It really wasn't. It's this false belief that having more, being more enriched, having material possessions, having the things we desire and more of them actually makes us happy, and it really doesn't. In fact, there's a lot of research that shows pursuing material goals actually leads to feeling less happy and more depressed. And you can check that out in my next video on depression. 40% of what makes up our happiness level is our intentional activity. Now, this video series is going to be focusing a little bit on circumstance, but is very much focusing on this last aspect, intentional activity. Happier people make things happen. You think through 3 different key qualities that increase happiness. If you want to make this thing work, you have to be willing to behave in the ways that make you happy, even though we're swimming upstream fighting false beliefs. That's number 1. Number 2, you have to be willing to change what you think and how you think. Totally reorienting yourself into the world. And finally, the most simple but probably the harder part of this is setting the goals in order to move towards happiness. You have to know where you are today in order to get where you want to be tomorrow. And that's really the point of this Oxford Happiness Questionnaire. In order to get to where we want to have that higher level of happiness, we have to know where we are today, because otherwise we don't know what direction to go. Or, if we're using a happiness skill, grateful enough for what we have. Having a score of 6 doesn't get much better than that. Be that as it may. Go ahead and check out this questionnaire. It's found in the description of this video. There'll be a link there that you can take this test and get results. And I would suggest, if you want to really be scientific about it, take this test a couple of times over the next 3 weeks. You'll get an average score, and you can more or less be assured that that's going to be your baseline happiness. And as we're going through this program, periodically take this questionnaire. See if the different skills you're using are improving your life. If not, it's time to use a different happiness skill. It's time to maybe tweak things a little bit in the one you're using. In other videos, we're going to get into exactly how to use the different happiness skills we're going to be covering here, but it's not just a matter of blindly doing them. In fact, that's a recipe for disaster. A great example is how people go about being grateful, counting their blessings. Research shows that people who are diving right in, very gung-ho, 3 times a day, counting their blessings, all the things they should be grateful for. Well, if they're so regimented and so set on doing that task as often as they are at the same time, same place, same way, really doesn't affect their happiness one bit. But it's really people who set aside maybe 1 day a week. Nothing major. Keeping it fresh, making it a special time to sit down and really reflect on your life, and make a quick list of the things that are making you happy. That actually does improve a person's sense of well-being and joy in their life. The breaking out of that rigid conformity is key in increasing happiness. So using this questionnaire as a guide to see how well or how effective these skills are is hugely important when it comes to tweaking them later on. If you like this video, go ahead and give it a like, share it with your friends, spread the happiness. I really want to hear from you guys, what you think about these videos, what questions you might have, or different perspectives that come up for you as you're going through the work in improving your life. And If you want to support my work, you can do so on Patreon. I'll see you in the next video.